Dan Morgan is a man of many identities. He is a devoted husband, a loving father, and a renowned car salesman. He is also a retired assassin. When his past threatens his present, he is forced to take his naive family on a journey like no other. Dan Morgan is a content father of 3 living in the city of Buffalo. In addition to being an excellent car salesman, Dan's life is very calm and he is well known in his community. He has a beautiful wife, Jessica, his teenage children, Kyle and Nina, and baby Max. Adolescence is the most challenging stage to manage with children. Kyle is an excellent video game player and is already well known among his peers. Jessica asks Dan to be more spontaneous because everything in his life is planned, making it somewhat boring since they follow the same routine daily, and with the children, passionate nights become difficult. Dan always avoids photos, but some naughty kids take one of him and post it on social media, and they end up spilling juice on Dan. Dan endures it without causing a scene, so their anniversary is ruined. Meanwhile, Jessica practices boxing, and Dan cannot defend himself when any naughty kid bothers him. During training, Jessica ends up hitting one, but they form a friendship based on this, and she talks to him about her family because she feels trapped, especially by Dan, who is very homebound and doesn't like to travel. She would like to see more of the world. Dan's life revolves around work and going to the supermarket, and that's why the kids make fun of him, considering him boring. In the supermarket, hitmen appear. It turns out Dan was hiding from former associates, but due to the photo the kids posted, they found him. With the baby in his arms, he has to fight to protect his and the baby's lives, astonishing everyone in the supermarket. He rushes home, takes out all the hidden weapons, and asks a friend to get false documentation for him and his entire family. They will pretend to take a family trip. He goes to find his family and first goes to Nina, telling them he has a surprise. However, he doesn't know his children's lives. Nina is not working in the school journalism section, and Kyle is not working in any workshop. The kids don't understand the reason for the surprise trip, and neither does Jessica, since Dan is not like that at all. They will go to Las Vegas, and Jessica doesn't recognize Dan, but he just wants to get away from there. He has saved a lot of money, which excites Jessica, but the bad guys have Dan in their sights. Jessica is happy, but Dan is being chased by the bad guys. It turns out he is hiding from former associates like McCaffrey from his youth as a hitman. When McCaffrey discovers his whereabouts, he sends dozens of assassins against the Morgan family. Dan packs up and heads to Las Vegas on the run, but he discovers the tracker they placed on him, proving to be smarter than the bad guys and escaping this time. The great family adventure begins towards Las Vegas. Dan tells the family it will be a vacation without cell phones and throws them away, making the kids extremely angry. They go old school, using a map to navigate. Jessica is obviously happy because she wanted adventure in her life, while the kids suffer without their beloved technology. McCaffrey is furious and sends dozens of assassins. Kyle, well known for his online games, meets a fan and takes a picture, so Dan decides not to stay at that hotel, but the assassins find them again. While the family sleeps in the car, Dan must come up with a plan to escape them. He gears up and shoots, with only Max aware of what's happening, but he can never recount the events. Dan fights intensely while the others sleep like babies, seeming dead, nothing waking them. When they wake up, they are already in Iowa. They argue because Nina wants to go to that university, mainly because Trevor, her special friend or boyfriend, is there. During the campus tour, the kids challenge the mother to drink head down, and of course, she won't back down, getting drunk like a college student. The family hates Trevor because since she met him, Nina has been acting differently and not herself. Jessica is thrilled with the new Dan but notices a strange man during the campus tour. It turns out she was wrong about the guy, and the bad guys find them again. Dan is fighting while the family thinks he is chatting with his new German friend, but Dan is fighting for his life. Dan knows how to fight and defend himself, but for how much longer can he protect his family? Nina goes to greet Trevor, only to find him with another girl, and he idiotically tells her that monogamy is acceptable. Nina is heartbroken, but her father teaches her a technique to get back at Trevor, making Nina feel a bit better. They travel through several states, and Nina opens up more to Dan. She now has to find her own path since she was going to study a career just to be near Trevor, even though her passion is journalism. Dan and Jessica have fun together. Dan changed because he hated his former life. He met Jessica and felt very comfortable, having his children made him very happy. Meanwhile, he calls the forger because they are now ready to flee the country. Well, Dan is ready. The family doesn't know anything, they just think they are on vacation. Kyle also opens up to Dan because he doesn't feel great. He isn't good at sports, but in gaming, Kyle is great. He challenges his father to a shooting game, considering himself very good because he learned it in the game. But Dan is beating him in the shooting game. They prepare again to continue their journey to Las Vegas, and they finally reach the famous Vegas. The family is excited about the vacation, while Dan meets with the forger. They still don't know what's happening, and Jessica just wants to enjoy the moment. But Dan warns the kids not to leave the room, but Kyle and Nina don't listen at all and go out with Max to enjoy the Vegas night. At night is where the most fun is, how could they miss it? Kyle is excited to be in the biggest gaming competition center. Dan wants to tell Jessica the truth and says it to her in French, but Jessica doesn't understand a word he's saying, though she is more surprised because she didn't know he spoke other languages. Meanwhile, Kyle is living his dream of competing in Vegas, but the assassins have found them, something Dan doesn't know yet. So everyone is enjoying the evening, but when Dan calls the kids and goes to look for them, he finds no one at home. Jessica is happy that they are alone because they can have a romantic evening, but then they are attacked and Jessica is kidnapped. She doesn't understand what's happening, and Dan has never used a weapon in front of the family. Jessica is bewildered and goes looking for her children, not wanting to see or hear from Dan. Meanwhile, Kyle is having the best night of his life and leads the team to victory. But then they find the kids and tell them they need to leave immediately. Dan tells the kids the truth. He was an assassin, and his colleagues want to hang him. The kids think he is too weak for that, but then they are shot at, and the whole family has to flee. They are stunned by what's happening. Dan explains the whole truth because he has no other choice. His real name is Sean, his mother died young, his father was violent, he joined the military, and met McCaffrey who involved him in a plan to catch the bad guys. But McCaffrey corrupted himself and sold them out to mercenaries. Now the kids understand why he hates technology. He gives them the fake IDs, and everyone gets mad at him for the big lies. They all have a life and now they have to lose it. Jessica scolds him for being part of it and never telling her the whole truth. She has never seen him as happy as he is now, on this trip where he has killed people. Jessica decides for herself and will leave with the kids since it's Dan they are after, not them. Dan is losing what he loves most. He loves being a family man, but Jessica asks him to stay away from them. They leave him alone. Jessica contacts the friend she made in boxing classes and tells her that they have fought, but she seems very rich. She tells her she had an ex who married someone else, who is unbearable. So she approached her and trusted her. Then Jessica realizes what's happening. She fell right into the trap and hands the whole family over to McCaffrey. She tells Dan that she has captured them and wants to see him immediately, alone. This is a deadly trap for Dan, as there are hundreds of men waiting for him. The crazy woman tells him that he could escape from the world, but he came back for the family that abandoned him. Then they find out that McCaffrey is Dan's father, the kid's grandfather, who is angry for being abandoned and sent people to finish him off. But now the father is proud because he saw how Dan took down every assassin he sent. He asks Dan to return to the family business. If he does, he will return his family safe and sound, otherwise, he will kill each one of them. Dan has no choice but to accept the offer, but from that moment on, he cannot approach his family again. Nina wants to rescue her father, but Jessica just wants to take care of her children without doing anything crazy, and Kyle doesn't want to leave without his father. So, he attacks the man with one of Max's diapers, deciding to rescue Dan. Meanwhile, the crazy woman is happy with Dan, but then Jessica arrives and sees them. Dan puts her to sleep and apologizes to Jessica, saying that all he cares about is being a husband and father, and he will never lie to them again. They spot the bad guys, who are numerous and coming after them. But Kyle, the gaming genius, will help this time by being his father's eyes and ears. McCaffrey orders his men to finish off Sean, aka Dan, leaving him with no escape. Dan prepares a surprise for them while Kyle tells him to go right, informs him how many men are near him, whether they are ahead or behind. Then move skillfully. McCaffrey sends the crazy one after the boy because he has the drone. Dan cannot kill his own family, but the old man orders everyone to be shot. Jessica misses every shot against one, so now it's a hand-to-hand fight between the two women. Kyle keeps informing Dan about all the men he sees, and Dan takes them down one by one. Jessica will not give up despite fighting an assassin, driven by the need to save her children. Nina goes to rescue her mother but fails. McCaffrey corners Dan, and Jessica, despite being at her limit, continues to fight to save her children. Dan confronts his own father, while Jessica shows why she was a gymnast but fails miserably. She tries again and ends up impaling one with a rod, finally finishing her off. Now it's just Dan and his father. McCaffrey is about to finish off his own son, but then the family arrives, and Nina says that family is the most important thing in the world. She sees much more than a killer, she sees a grandfather, believing they can overcome this as a family. But she is just buying time for Dan to defend himself. They escape as a great family. 6 months later, Nina does a great report on a hitman, her grandfather. Dan has become a police officer, Jessica is doing great at work, Kyle is living his dream, and they embark on another great family trip.